The boy had learned early in life that the best way to survive was to become invisible. Not literally, of course, but there was a skill to it, a way of moving through rooms without making a sound, of sitting so still that people forgot you were there. He had been practicing this skill since he was 6 years old, and by the time he turned 15, he had gotten very good at it. His caseworker had dropped him off at the new house on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the neighborhood looked like something out of a magazine. Big houses with perfect lawns. Cars that still had that new car shine. Kids riding bikes down the sidewalk without a care in the world. The family who lived here was called the Foster family. That was how he thought of all of them now. Not by their names, not as people he might grow to care about. Just the Foster family. It made things easier when he had to leave. And he always had to leave eventually. This Foster family was different from the others, though. You could tell they had money. Real money. The kind that came from generations of people doing well. Not just one lucky break. The house had 6 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. There was a pool in the backyard, covered up for the winter. And when the foster mother showed him around, she walked with the confidence of someone who had never once worried about where her next meal was coming from. They had 2 kids of their own, a girl who was 17 and played violin in some fancy youth orchestra, and a boy who was 18, already accepted to one of those universities that everyone has heard of. Both of them looked at the foster kid like he was a stray dog their parents had brought home. Not with cruelty, exactly. Just with a kind of confused distance. Like they were not sure what they were supposed to do with him. He was used to that look. He had seen it in 7 different homes over the past 9 years. The foster father was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of firm handshake that was meant to establish dominance. He worked in finance, whatever that meant. The foster mother stayed home, but she was always busy with charity events and committees, and things that sounded important but seemed to involve a lot of lunch meetings. They gave him the bedroom at the end of the 2nd floor hallway. It was the smallest room in the house, but it was still bigger than any room he had ever had to himself. There was a bed with clean sheets, a desk by the window, and a closet that was completely empty, waiting for clothes he did not have. On that first day, the foster father sat him down in the living room for what he called a family meeting. The 2 biological kids were there too, though the daughter kept checking her phone and the son looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The foster father explained the rules of the house. Curfew was at 9 on school nights, 10 on weekends. No friends over without permission. Homework before screen time. Dishes in the dishwasher, not the sink. Shoes off at the door. The boy nodded along to all of it. He had heard rules like these before. Every house had them. And every house expected him to follow them perfectly, while their own kids got away with breaking them. That was just how it worked. But then the foster father said something that made the boy look up. There was a room at the front of the house, a formal living room that nobody seemed to use. Inside that room, positioned near the window, where the afternoon light fell just right, was a piano. Not just any piano. A grand piano. The kind with the big curved lid and the legs that looked like they belonged in a museum. It was black and shiny and absolutely beautiful. The foster father pointed toward that room without actually walking into it. That piano, he said, belonged to the foster mother's mother. She had passed away 2 years ago and left it to them. It was worth more than most cars. It was not a toy. It was not something to be touched or played with or even looked at for too long. The piano, the foster father said very clearly, was off limits. The boy nodded. He understood. There were always things in foster homes that were off limits. The good snacks in the pantry, the family photos on the mantle, the feeling of actually belonging. But as he walked back to his room that night, he could not stop thinking about that piano. Here is the thing that nobody knew about him. Not his caseworker, not any of the foster families he had lived with, not even the kids at the group home where he had spent 2 years before this. The boy had a secret. When he was 9 years old, living in a group home on the rough side of the city, there had been a piano in the basement. It was old and beaten up, with 3 broken keys and a sound that was never quite right. Most of the kids ignored it. Some of them banged on it just to make noise. But the boy had been drawn to it in a way he could not explain. There was a janitor at that group home, an older man who worked the night shift and always smelled like coffee and wood polish. He had noticed the boy sitting in the basement one evening, just staring at the piano keys like they held some kind of answer. The janitor had asked if he wanted to learn. The boy had not known what to say. Nobody had ever offered to teach him anything before. Not anything good, anyway. But he had nodded, and the janitor had sat down beside him. And that was how it started. For 2 years, almost every night, the janitor taught the boy how to play. They started with simple things: the position of the hands, the names of the notes, little songs that children learn, though the boy had never learned them when he was actually a child. And then, slowly, they moved on to harder things. Real music, the kind that made you feel something deep in your chest. The janitor told him he had a gift, that his fingers moved across the keys like they had been born there, that he played with a feeling that could not be taught, only discovered. The boy did not know about gifts. He did not think he had ever been given one. But when he played that broken piano in that basement, something inside him went quiet. All the noise in his head, all the worry and the fear and the loneliness, it all just stopped. There was only the music, and then the group home closed down. Budget cuts, they said. The kids were scattered to different placements across the state. The boy never saw the janitor again. He never even got to say goodbye. That was 6 years ago. 6 years without a piano. 6 years of carrying that music around inside him with nowhere to let it out. And now, in this big fancy house, with the family that did not really want him, there was a Steinway grand piano sitting in the front room. And he was not allowed to touch it. That first night, the boy lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. The house was too quiet. In group homes and crowded foster placements, there was always noise. Someone crying, someone arguing, someone watching television too loud. But here, there was nothing. Just the hum of the heating system and the occasional sound of a car passing on the street outside. He thought about the piano. He thought about the way the light had fallen across those black and white keys. He thought about what it would feel like to sit on that bench and let his fingers remember what they had learned all those years ago. But he did not get up. He did not sneak downstairs. He just lay there in the dark, being invisible, being quiet, being exactly what everyone expected him to be, because that was the safest thing. That was how you survived. At least, that was what he told himself. But something had shifted inside him. A door had cracked open, and no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, he could feel the music calling to him from that room at the front of the house. It was only a matter of time. 3 weeks passed before he finally gave in. It was a Thursday night, somewhere around 2 in the morning. The boy had been lying awake for hours, the same way he did most nights. Sleep had never come easy to him. His mind was always too loud, replaying conversations and memories and all the things that had gone wrong in his life. But lately, there was something else keeping him awake. That piano, downstairs. He could almost hear it calling to him through the floorboards. He told himself he was just going to look at it. That was all. He would walk downstairs, stand in the doorway of that formal living room, and look at the piano for a minute. Then he would go back to bed. No harm done. No rules broken. The house was completely dark. The foster parents slept at the other end of the hall. Their door always closed. The 2 biological kids had rooms on the 3rd floor, and they stayed up late on their phones most nights. But by 2 in the morning, even they were usually asleep. The boy moved through the hallway like a ghost. He had gotten good at knowing which floorboards creaked and which ones stayed silent. He had mapped out the entire house in his first week, the way he did with every new placement. It was a survival skill. You never knew when you might need to move without being heard. The stairs were the tricky part. The third step from the top made a sound like a wounded animal if you put your weight in the wrong spot. The seventh step was loose and wobbled slightly, but if you stayed close to the railing and moved slowly, you could make it down without a single noise. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stood in the front hallway. The formal living room was just ahead, through an archway that had no door. Moonlight came through the big window, falling across the floor in silver rectangles. And there, in the middle of that pale light, sat the piano. It was even more beautiful at night. The black surface seemed to glow, reflecting the moon like still water. The keys were a perfect row of white and black, waiting for someone to bring them to life. The boy stepped into the room. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He was not supposed to be here. If someone caught him, they would think he was trying to steal something, or break something, or cause trouble. That was what people always assumed about kids like him. But he was not here to cause trouble. He just wanted to be close to it. Just for a minute. He walked over to the piano and stood beside it. His hand reached out, almost on its own, and touched the smooth wood of the case. It was cool under his fingers, perfectly polished. He could see his own reflection in the surface, a shadow of a boy who did not quite belong anywhere. And then, before he could stop himself, he sat down on the bench. The leather was soft and worn in a way that suggested someone had once spent many hours sitting here. The foster mother's mother, probably. The woman who had left this piano behind when she died. He wondered what kind of music she had played. He wondered if she had loved it the way he did. His fingers hovered over the keys. He should not do this. He knew he should not. If anyone heard him, it would be over. Another failed placement. Another black mark on his record. Another caseworker conversation about how he just could not seem to follow the rules. But the music was right there, waiting inside him. It had been waiting for 6 years. And now, with this beautiful instrument beneath his hands, he could not hold it back anymore. He pressed a single key. The note rang out in the silence, pure and clear, and he held his breath, waiting to hear footsteps, or voices, or the sound of someone coming to see what was happening. Nothing. The house stayed quiet. He pressed another key, then another. His fingers found a simple chord, and he let it hang in the air for a moment before releasing it. The sound was incredible, so much richer and fuller than that broken piano in the group home basement. Every note had depth to it, like it contained entire worlds. And then, slowly, softly, he began to play. It was a piece the janitor had taught him years ago, a simple melody, something classical that he had never learned the name of. But his fingers remembered it. They remembered every note, every pause, every place where the music swelled and every place where it pulled back. It was like riding a bicycle, he thought. Your body just knew. He played so quietly that the music barely rose above a whisper. His touch on the keys was feather-light, just enough to make sound, but not enough to travel through the walls and ceilings of this sleeping house. It was harder to play this way, actually. It required more control, more precision, but he managed it. When he finished that first piece, he sat in the silence for a long moment. His hands were trembling. There were tears on his face. Though he did not remember starting to cry, he had not realized how much he had missed this, how much he had needed it. The music was like oxygen, and he had been holding his breath for 6 years without even knowing it. He looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 3 in the morning. He should go back to bed. He should walk away right now, and never do this again. But he did not walk away. Instead, he came back the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. It became a ritual. Every night, somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning, the boy would slip downstairs and sit at that piano. He would play as softly as he could, working through the pieces he remembered and trying to learn new ones. During the day, when no one was paying attention to him, he would watch videos on his phone, tutorials that showed how to play different songs, performances by professional pianists that made his jaw drop. He would memorize the finger positions, the rhythms, the way the music was supposed to sound. And then, at night, in the dark, he would try to recreate what he had seen. It was slow progress. There was so much he had forgotten, and so much more that he had never learned in the first place. The janitor had given him a foundation, but there were huge gaps in his knowledge. He did not know how to read sheet music. He did not understand most of the technical terms. He was figuring it out as he went, one note at a time. But every night, he got a little better. Every night, the music came a little easier. And every night, for those 2 hours in the dark, he was not a foster kid with a troubled past. He was not invisible. He was just a boy, and a piano, and a sound that made him feel like he was finally home. The foster family had no idea. They went about their lives, completely unaware that every night, while they slept, their forbidden piano was coming to life. The foster mother complained once about feeling tired, wondering if the heating system was making strange noises that were disturbing her sleep. The foster father mentioned that the piano seemed slightly out of tune and made a note to call someone about it, but no one suspected the boy. Why would they? He was quiet. He followed the rules. He kept to himself. He was exactly the kind of kid you forgot was even in the house. 3 months went by like this. 3 months of secret music, of stolen hours, of a boy slowly rediscovering the only thing that had ever made him feel whole. He got careless, of course. That was how these things always went. He started staying at the piano longer. He started playing a little louder, getting lost in the music and forgetting to hold back. He started taking risks, trying pieces that were more complicated, more emotional, more demanding. And one night, in the middle of a piece that the janitor had once told him was written by a man named Chopin, he made a mistake. Not a musical mistake. His fingers were fine. The notes were all in the right places. No, his mistake was simpler than that. He forgot to watch the door, and when the light snapped on and he looked up from the keys, blinking in the sudden brightness, he saw the foster father standing in the archway with a look on his face that the boy knew all too well. It was the look that came right before everything fell apart. The boy's hands froze on the keys. The last note he had played hung in the air for a moment, then faded into nothing. The silence that followed was the loudest thing he had ever heard. The foster father stood in the archway, his hand still on the light switch. He was wearing pajamas and a robe, and his hair was messy from sleep, but his eyes were wide awake, and they were fixed on the boy with an expression that was impossible to read. Behind him, the foster mother appeared. She was pulling a robe around her shoulders, squinting against the bright lights. And behind her, on the stairs, the boy could see the 2 biological kids. The daughter had her phone in her hand, probably ready to record whatever drama was about to unfold. The son just looked annoyed, like he had been woken up for something that was not worth his time. The boy stood up from the piano bench so fast that he almost knocked it over. His mind was racing, already preparing for what came next. He knew this script by heart. He had lived through it so many times before. First would come the anger. The foster father would raise his voice and demand to know what the boy thought he was doing. He would talk about trust and respect and rules. He would say things like disappointed and consequences and maybe even dangerous. Then would come the phone call. The caseworker would be contacted first thing in the morning. There would be a meeting, probably at the house, where everyone would sit around and discuss the boy like he was not even in the room. The foster parents would explain that they had tried, they really had, but the boy just was not a good fit for their family. And then would come the bag. The black garbage bag that foster kids learned to pack their belongings in, because nobody ever gave them real luggage. He would stuff his few clothes and his phone charger and the one book he had kept for years into that bag, and he would wait by the door for someone to come take him away. Another placement failed. Another family that did not want him. Another stop on the endless road to nowhere. The boy opened his mouth to apologize, to explain, to say something, anything, that might make this better. But before he could speak, the foster father held up his hand. One rule, the foster father said. His voice was quiet, which was almost worse than yelling. I gave you one rule. One simple rule. And you broke it. I know, the boy said. His voice came out as barely a whisper. I am sorry. I will pack my things. He started to move toward the door, but the foster mother stepped into the room. She was looking at the boy strangely, her head tilted to one side like she was trying to figure something out. Wait, she said. The foster father turned to her, frowning. Linda, he started. But she shook her head. Just wait, she said again. Then she looked at the boy. Play it again. The boy blinked. He was sure he had misheard her. What? The piece you were just playing, the foster mother said. Play it again. The foster father made a frustrated sound. This is not the time for, please, the foster mother said, and something in her voice made everyone go quiet. She was not looking at her husband anymore. She was looking at the piano, at the bench, at the keys that the boy had just been touching. There was something in her eyes that the boy did not understand. Something that looked almost like pain. The boy did not know what to do. This was not how the script was supposed to go. He was supposed to apologize and pack and leave. That was the pattern. That was what always happened. But the foster mother was still looking at him, waiting. And for some reason, he could not explain. He sat back down on the bench. His hands were shaking. His whole body was shaking. Actually, he could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him, watching, judging. The daughter had definitely started recording on her phone. The son had come down a few more steps to get a better view. The boy placed his fingers on the keys. He took a breath, and then he began to play. It was the same piece he had been playing when the lights came on, a nocturne by Chopin, though he had not known that was what it was called until a few weeks ago. The janitor had just called it the night song, and that name had always felt right to the boy. It was music that belonged in the dark, in the quiet hours when the rest of the world was asleep. At first, his fingers stumbled. He was too nervous, too aware of everyone watching. He missed a note in the third measure, and had to recover. His timing was off, rushing in some places and dragging in others. But then something shifted. He stopped thinking about the people behind him. He stopped thinking about the failed placement, and the garbage bag, and the caseworker. He let all of that fall away. And he just played. The music filled the room. It was sad and beautiful and full of longing, the way the best music always is. It swelled and faded and swelled again, like waves on a shore, like breath moving in and out of a body. The boy played with his eyes closed, feeling each note rather than thinking about it, letting his fingers remember what his mind had almost forgotten. When he reached the final passage, he slowed down, letting each note hang in the air before moving to the next. The last chord was soft, almost a whisper, and then there was silence. The boy opened his eyes and looked down at his hands. They had stopped shaking. For the first time since the lights came on, he felt calm. Then he turned around. The foster mother was crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just tears running down her face, her hand pressed against her mouth. She was staring at the boy like she had never seen him before. The foster father had sat down on the arm of the couch. His expression had completely changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something that looked like confusion, and maybe even awe. The daughter had lowered her phone. The son had come all the way down the stairs and was standing in the archway. His arms crossed over his chest, but his face was softer than the boy had ever seen it. Nobody spoke for what felt like a very long time. Then the foster mother took a step forward. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" The boy did not know how to answer. He had never talked about the janitor to anyone. He had never talked about the group home basement, or the broken piano, or the 2 years of secret lessons. That was his story, his private thing, and he had kept it locked away for so long that he was not sure he knew how to let it out. But the foster mother was still crying, and she did not look angry. She looked like someone who had just witnessed something she never expected to see. So the boy took a breath, and he started to talk. He told them about the group home, about the piano in the basement with the missing keys, about the janitor who worked the night shift and smelled like coffee and wood polish. He told them about the lessons, night after night for 2 years, and about how the music was the only thing that ever made the noise in his head go quiet. He told them about the day the group home closed and how he never got to say goodbye. About the 6 years since then, moving from placement to placement, never once finding another piano. About lying awake at night with songs stuck in his head and no way to let them out. And finally, he told them about this piano. About how he had known from the first moment he saw it that he was going to break the rule. About the 3 months of secret practice, of teaching himself new pieces in the dark, of feeling for the first time in years like he might actually be good at something. When he finished, the room was completely silent. The foster mother wiped her eyes and took another step toward him. "That piece," she said. "The one you just played. Do you know what it is?" The boy nodded. "A nocturne," he said. "By Chopin." The foster mother smiled. But it was a sad smile, full of memory. "It was my mother's favorite," she said. "She used to play it every Sunday morning, when I was a little girl. I have not heard it in this house since she died." She looked at the piano, then back at the boy. "And you taught yourself to play it," she said, "in the dark, on my mother's piano." The boy did not know what to say. So he just nodded. The foster mother turned to her husband. Something passed between them, a conversation without words. Then the foster father stood up and walked over to where the boy was sitting. The boy braced himself. "Here it comes," he thought. The speech about rules and consequences. The call to the caseworker. The garbage bag. But instead, the foster father just looked at him for a long moment. And then he said something the boy had never heard before in any foster home. "Tell us more," the foster father said. "Tell us everything." And for the first time in his life, the boy did. They talked until the sun came up. The boy sat on the piano bench, and the foster family sat around the living room. And for the first time, since he had arrived in this house, they actually talked. Not the polite surface conversations about school and chores and schedules. Real talk. The kind where you say things you have never said out loud before. The boy told them about his childhood. The parts he remembered, anyway. He told them about his mother, who had loved him, but could not take care of him. About the day the social workers came and took him away, and how he had screamed and kicked and begged to stay. About the first foster home, where he learned that crying only made things worse. About all the homes after that, each one leaving its own kind of mark on him. He told them about learning to be invisible. How it was easier to disappear than to hope. How every time he started to feel safe somewhere, something would go wrong and he would have to leave. After a while, he just stopped trying to belong. It hurt less that way. The foster mother listened with tears in her eyes. The foster father listened with his hands clasped together, leaning forward like he did not want to miss a single word. Even the 2 biological kids listened, really listened, in a way they never had before. When the boy finished talking, there was a long silence. The sky outside the window had turned from black to gray to pale pink. Birds were starting to sing. A new day was beginning, though none of them had slept. The foster mother was the first to speak. She told the boy about her own mother, about how she had been a piano teacher for 40 years, giving lessons to kids in the neighborhood for almost nothing because she believed everyone deserved to learn music. About how she had played that Steinway every single day until her fingers got too stiff from arthritis. About how she had made the foster mother promise to keep the piano, to take care of it. even though no one in the family really played. I thought I was keeping it safe by not letting anyone touch it, the foster mother said. But maybe that was wrong. Maybe my mother would have wanted it to be played. Maybe she would have wanted someone like you to find it. The foster father cleared his throat. He was not a man who showed emotion easily. The boy could tell. But something in his face had changed over the course of the night. The hardness was gone. In its place was something softer. Something that almost looked like respect. We owe you an apology, the foster father said. We brought you into our home, but we did not really let you in. We gave you a room and food and rules, but we never asked who you were. We never tried to know you. The boy did not know what to say. No foster parent had ever apologized to him before. He was not sure what he was supposed to do with that. The daughter spoke up then. She had been quiet all night, just watching and listening. But now, she uncrossed her arms and looked at the boy with something like curiosity. That piece you played, she said. The Chopin Nocturne. I have been playing violin for 8 years, and I am not sure I could play something that emotional. How do you do that? The boy thought about it for a moment. I do not know, he admitted. I just feel it. The music. I mean, when I play, it is like all the stuff inside me that I cannot say out loud finally has somewhere to go. The daughter nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what he meant. The son did not say anything. He had never been friendly to the boy. Never really acknowledged him at all. But as the family sat there in the early morning light, he caught the boy's eye and gave him a small nod. It was not much, but it was something. It was more than the boy had ever gotten from him before. The foster mother stood up and walked over to the piano. She ran her hand along the smooth black surface, the same way the boy had done on that first night 3 months ago. My mother used to say that music finds the people who need it most, she said. I think she would have liked you. I think she would have been proud that her piano ended up in your hands. She turned to the boy with a look of determination on her face. We are going to do things differently now, she said. No more secrets. No more hiding. If you want to play this piano, you play it. As much as you want. As loud as you want. This is your home too. And it is time we started acting like it. The boy felt something crack open inside his chest. He had spent so many years building walls around himself, protecting himself from disappointment and rejection. And now, in one night, this family was trying to tear those walls down. It was terrifying, but it was also the most hopeful thing that had ever happened to him. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The foster mother found a piano teacher, a woman who had studied at a conservatory and now gave private lessons to serious students. She was expensive, the boy knew. But the foster parents did not seem to care. They set up lessons twice a week, on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, in the formal living room that was no longer off limits. The teacher was tough. She did not go easy on the boy just because he had a sad story. She pushed him hard, correcting his technique, making him play the same passage over and over until he got it right. She assigned him exercises that made his fingers ache and pieces that seemed impossible at first. But she also told him he had something special. Raw talent, she called it. The kind of natural ability that could not be taught. She said that with proper training, there was no telling how far he could go. The boy threw himself into practicing. Every day after school, he would sit at that piano for hours. The foster mother would bring him snacks and water and remind him to take breaks. Sometimes, she would just sit in the corner of the room and listen, her eyes closed, a small smile on her face. The foster father started coming home from work earlier so he could hear the boy practice. He did not say much, but he would stand in the doorway and nod along to the music. Once, the boy caught him wiping his eyes during a particularly emotional piece. They never talked about it, but the boy understood. Even the biological kids came around. The daughter started asking the boy about his music, sharing her own experiences with violin, talking about performance anxiety and the fear of messing up in front of an audience. They were not friends exactly, but they were something close to it, something that felt like family. The son took longer to warm up. He was busy with college applications and his own life, and the boy did not blame him for that. But one evening, the son knocked on the boy's bedroom door and asked if he wanted to watch a movie with him. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. For the first time in his life, the boy started to believe that maybe this placement would be different. Maybe he would not have to pack a garbage bag and wait by the door. Maybe he had finally found a place where he could stay. The piano teacher told him about a talent show at the local high school. It was in the spring, a few months away. Students could sign up to perform whatever they wanted, and the whole community came out to watch. "You should enter," the teacher said. "You are ready." The boy was not so sure. Playing alone in the living room was one thing. Playing in front of hundreds of strangers was something else entirely. The thought of it made his stomach twist into knots. But the foster mother encouraged him. The foster father said he would be proud no matter what happened. The daughter offered to help him pick out something nice to wear. Even the son said he would show up to watch, so the boy signed up. He chose the Chopin Nocturne, the piece that had started everything, and he practiced it until he could play it in his sleep. The night of the talent show arrived faster than he expected. The auditorium was packed. The lights were bright. Backstage, the boy could hear other students performing, some good and some not so good, and each round of applause made his heart beat a little faster. And then, it was his turn. He walked out onto that stage, sat down at the piano they had set up in the center, and looked out at the sea of faces in the audience. Somewhere in the middle of the crowd, he could see the Foster family. All four of them, sitting together, waiting to hear him play. The boy took a deep breath. He placed his fingers on the keys, and he began. The first note was shaky. The boy felt it leave his fingers and float out into the auditorium, and for a terrible moment he thought he had made a mistake. He thought about all those people watching him, judging him, waiting for the foster kid to mess up and prove that he did not belong on that stage. But then the second note came, and the third, and somewhere around the fourth or fifth note, something clicked into place. The boy stopped seeing the audience. He stopped feeling the heat of the stage lights on his face. He stopped thinking about all the reasons he should be afraid. There was only the piano beneath his hands and the music that wanted to come out of him. He played the way he had played in the dark all those nights. Not for anyone else, just for himself. Just because the music was there, and it needed to be heard. The nocturne unfolded like a story. It started soft and gentle, like a whisper in an empty room. Then it grew, swelling with emotion, building towards something bigger. The boy leaned into the keys, feeling every note in his chest, letting the music say all the things he had never been able to put into words. He thought about his mother, the one who had loved him but could not keep him. He wondered if she ever thought about him, if she knew what had become of the little boy she had lost. He let that sadness pour through his fingers and into the keys. He thought about the janitor, the man who had seen something in a lonely kid and decided to do something about it. The boy had never gotten to thank him, had never gotten to say goodbye. He let that gratitude and that grief become part of the music. He thought about all the foster homes, all the packed bags and closed doors and promises that were never kept, all the times he had made himself invisible just to survive. He let those memories rise up and then let them go, releasing them into the air with every note. And he thought about this family, the one that had taken him in, and then, against all odds, had actually let him in. The foster mother, who cried when he played her mother's favorite song. The foster father who had learned to see him as more than just a case file. The daughter who talked to him about music, like he was an equal. The son, who had finally made room for him. The music reached its peak, a moment of pure emotion that seemed to fill every corner of the auditorium. And then, slowly, it began to fade. The boy gentled his touch, letting the notes grow softer and softer until they were barely there at all. The final chord hung in the air like a held breath, and then there was silence. The boy lifted his hands from the keys and let them rest in his lap. He was breathing hard, like he had just run a race. His eyes were wet, though he did not remember starting to cry. He sat there for a moment, not sure what to do next, not sure what had just happened. Then he looked up at the audience. No one was moving. No one was making a sound. Hundreds of people sat in their seats, completely still, like they had all forgotten how to breathe. The boy felt his heart drop. He had messed up. He had done something wrong. They hated it. They were going to. And then the foster mother stood up. She was in the middle of the auditorium, surrounded by strangers, and she rose to her feet with tears streaming down her face. She brought her hands together and began to clap. The foster father stood up next to her, then the daughter, then the son. All four of them, standing and clapping, not caring what anyone else thought. And then, like a wave, the rest of the audience followed. One by one, row by row, people rose to their feet. The applause started small, but grew louder and louder, until it was a roar that filled the entire auditorium. People were cheering. Some of them were wiping their eyes. A few rows back, the boy saw his piano teacher standing with her hand over her heart, nodding at him like she had known this would happen all along. The boy sat at the piano and watched the standing ovation wash over him. He did not know what to do. He had never experienced anything like this. For his whole life, he had been invisible. And now, suddenly, everyone could see him. He stood up from the bench on legs that felt like they might give out. He gave a small bow, the way he had seen performers do in videos online. The applause got even louder. Someone in the back whistled. The provided. Someone else shouted something that sounded like bravo. The boy walked off the stage in a daze. Backstage, other students patted him on the shoulder and told him he was amazing. A teacher he had never spoken to shook his hand. Everyone wanted to know where he had learned to play like that, how long he had been practicing, why they had never heard him perform before. He did not know how to answer any of their questions. He just smiled and nodded and tried not to fall apart. The foster family found him in the hallway outside the auditorium. The foster mother reached him first, pulling him into a hug so tight he could barely breathe. She was still crying. And now, he was crying too. And neither of them cared who saw. "I am so proud of you," she whispered into his ear. So proud. The foster father hugged him next, which was surprising because the foster father was not really a hugger. But he held on tight for a long moment. And when he pulled back, his eyes were red. "You did good, kid," he said. "You did really good." The daughter punched him lightly on the arm and told him he had made her look bad with her violin. But she was grinning when she said it. And she hugged him too. The son hung back for a second, like he was not sure what to do. But then he stepped forward and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "That was incredible," the son said. "Seriously. I had no idea you could do that." The boy looked at this family gathered around him in that crowded hallway. These people who had started as strangers, who had become something more. He thought about how close he had come to losing this. If the foster mother had not asked him to play again that night, if the foster father had just called the caseworker like he was supposed to, if any one thing had gone differently, the boy would be somewhere else right now, packing another garbage bag, starting over again. But that was not what happened. Instead, he was here, with a family, with people who cared about him, with a future that suddenly seemed full of possibilities. The boy went on to do great things. He got a scholarship to a music conservatory, one of the best in the country. He studied with teachers who had performed on the biggest stages in the world. He entered competitions and won some of them. He played concerts that made audiences weep. But before any of that, he did one more important thing. He found the janitor. It took months of searching. Phone calls and emails and dead ends. But eventually, the boy tracked him down to a small apartment in a city 3 hours away. The janitor was retired now, living on a pension, spending his days reading books and listening to the radio. When the boy knocked on his door and the janitor opened it, there was a moment where neither of them spoke. The janitor was older than the boy remembered. His hair was white now, and he moved more slowly, but his eyes were the same, kind and patient and warm. "You probably do not remember me," the boy started to say, but the janitor was already smiling. "The kid from the basement," he said. "The one with the gift." The boy nodded. And then he told the janitor everything. About the foster home and the forbidden piano. About getting caught and playing for the family. About the lessons and the talent show and the standing ovation. About the scholarship and the future that was waiting for him. The janitor listened to all of it. And when the boy was finished, the old man reached out and put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "I always knew you would make something of yourself," the janitor said. "I just did not know it would be this." The boy flew the janitor out for his first professional concert a year later. Front row seats. The best in the house. And when the boy walked out onto that stage and sat down at the piano, he looked into the audience and saw the old man sitting there with tears in his eyes. The boy played his heart out that night. And when he finished, the janitor was the first one to stand. Some people said the boy was lucky, that he had been in the right place at the right time, that the foster family had saved him. But the boy knew the truth. It was not luck. It was a broken piano in a basement. It was a janitor who took the time to teach a lonely kid something beautiful. It was 3 months of secret practice in the dark, refusing to let go of the one thing that made him feel alive. They told him not to touch the piano, but he did, and the sound left them silent,